I'm Artist Barber. George Alshin and I are here today with Edwin C. Roth. We are going to interview him. He was born on August 20th, 1919, and he's lived in Lowell or near his whole life. His address is Potter's Road in Lowell, and he has a wonderful story to tell us, and we'd like him to start with your birth.
My which?
Your birth.
August the 20th.
August the 20th, 1919. Okay, there's the camera over there. Ed, why don't you tell us all about it? Go ahead.
Well, I was born on a farm over by was a place known as Allendale. It no longer exists. It's all farm country now. And it was a train stop. There was a hotel there, and Dad was working on the farm at that point, and then he bought the farm in Keene Township in 1920, and we moved to the farm in March on a sled, 2 horses, and my 2 brothers, and the contents that they could carry in March of 1920. And from there on, I don't recall the ride, but I guess I didn't freeze.
You were quite young, yes.
Yes, I was 8 months old. So no memory of that, only what I was told.
What you were told.
And from there, I just grew up as a kid, and at 6 years old, I took the country school, which was known as the Bowen School at the time, and walked a half a mile with my 2 brothers, and walk home for lunch, walk back to school again. So we got exercise to and from school, and that worked out real well. As I grew and developed, I graduated from in about 1930. They built a new school across the road so they could make a big curve on the highway. It was one of these 3-cornered curves, so the old school was getting dilapidated and I think a little too small, and that was moved away. From then on, I to the next, that was in the 4th grade, and I moved into the new school across the road. And from there on, we back and forth, and went up through the grades, and except, as I recall, I was the only one in the 4th grade, and the teacher didn't like the idea of teaching just one person in a grade. She gave me the choice. You can go back and take the 3rd grade over, which there was 2 or 3 children, or you can take the 5th grade, skip the 4th, and where there's some children. Well, I chose the easy part. I said I don't have to study, and I got to know all this. So I went back with the 3rd grade, took that over, and had a ball, I guess.
That was an easy year for you.
That set me back a year, and I don't know if that hurt me any.
Probably not.
From there, I graduated from the 8th grade in 1925. No, 19. I can't figure it. I was 10 years old when I graduated, I think, from the
Would be 29.
29.
And then high school started going. 1935, I started high school.
Okay.
There was no buses. Lowell had no buses at that time. So you either walked to school if you were written in, or you drove, or your parents took you there. So I had one brother and one sister that were going to school, and I picked up 2 passengers. So there was 6 of us in the car every day. Consequently, the school let out, we had to leave. And most of the boys, 3 of us, had chores to do. We couldn't stay for sports and other events, but I don't know that hurt us any. We learned to work anyway.
That's right.
That was the important factor those days. In 1939, I graduated from high school. In 1940, I enrolled for the winter term of a short course at Michigan State University in primarily just agriculture, things that were involved in running and working a farm. Because I knew that farming was going to be my living, that I would take it over the farm, which I did, and got to meet a number of other students from around the state. So that worked out real well.
You were the son that was going to take over the farm because your brothers were in the service, is that why?
Yes, my brother was at the same time. I think you forget the year. Father said, I want to retire. I want to sell the stock and the tools to you 2 boys, and so I can retire and do some traveling, which they did. And we worked together. Well, the big tragedy, the same year we got married, the original plan, we were going to live in a house where the cows were, because we got married in May, and then the barn burned, and had all the feed that had been harvested, the grain and the first cutting hay. So that was a real setback. So we had a decision to make. We only had 20 stanchions in the one barn. Where the barn burned, there was 40 stanchions. And you had another small barn that we built earlier, had 20. And then the farm half a mile north of the main farm that my father bought sometime in the late 20s. It was 80 acres, and we kept heifers there. And so I would made the decision that we would move to that farm where there was a house, and I would milk 20 cows there, and my brother would milk 20 cows in the small barn on the old farm there. And so that's the way it happened, and in some ways it was kind of a blessing for us that we could be by ourselves, and we worked
As
the farm.
newlyweds, right?
My brother and I worked the farm together, and as a one business. He had some different ideas, and there wasn't getting to the point that with one set of machinery we couldn't get the harvesting done and the planting done on time, so we decided to dissolve partnerships. I bought some equipment and he bought some we shared, and so at that point in about 48 or 49, we split, and from there we were working on our own.
Did you have children by then?
And we had one
One
grandchild, yeah,
No, no.
One son, right?
one
Son.
son, yes. And he helped on the farm when he could until he was graduated in high school. Then I guess he went to work somewhere else, or was up to college. I kind of forget.
You were doing the work anyway, right?
Doing the work, yeah. Well, for 10 years, we were the only ones, Doris and I, that got the work done, milked the cows, and 7 days a week, and you don't travel very far in between. Furthest we would get away would be to her folks, which was up in the Remus area
Not too
for a
far.
few hours.
She was a good farmer's wife then, huh?
And, yeah, we got along real well. And we did later hire some high school boys Saturdays to help out. And things went along real well to that point. So I don't know just how far here I should go.
Well, you're having your farm, and you and your wife, and you had one son, and then you had a couple daughters.
Yes, we do. And I was renting land next door on 80 acres. And at a point, I don't remember the year, but I purchased it. The lady was 100 years old, and she moved into Lowell at that time to assisted living, and that worked out real well.
So how many acres did you have then?
Well, I had 280 to be 160 acres
Okay.
at that point. And then later on, in 1956, my knees started bothering me, just squatting down for milking cows in the stall. I had to make a decision: do I continue milking, or do I try to do something else, or build a milking parlor so I can milk standing up? Which I did, and built that in 1956, mostly myself. In March of 1957, everything was ready to go, and so we started milking in the parlor where the cows come in elevated.
Was that a new invention then, kind of, or?
Well, my brother was in that business selling and installing that equipment, so that worked out
that
real
helped,
well.
yes.
It was the first, I talked to the inspector, should I put it in the north end of the barn? He says no. He says one guy had done that over south of Ionia, hadn't worked out too well, and he said go out here beyond the barnyard and build a parlor by itself, which was the smartest thing that I'd done at the time, and which left more room in the barn for heifers in that respect. So
So your milk cows had their own parlor then?
they had their own parlor. Yeah, at first I started out with, since I was milking 20 cows, 3-stall milking, 3 cows at one time, because one was done and another one could replace her. Well, as the herd grew, as I built another barn, what we know as a loafing barn, when the cow gets milked, she goes and lays down on a nice bedded pack.
Gets to take a break, huh?
In the process, in the silo, instead of pitching the silage out as I did before into a cart, and then wheel it down the alley and pitch each cow what she needed. This way, I had a silo unloader installed in the new silo, and you turn the switch and the silage would come down. It would drop into an auger that I built, and would spread it out about 30 feet long so the cows could come and eat anytime
There was
they
room for
wanted.
everybody then.
It was labor saving, considerable, yes. And I fed the hay on the outside of the barn instead of inside, so I didn't use the inside the barn anymore. And consequently, since I had room for more heifers and calves, the herd grew, and to the point it took too long to milk in the 3 stalls, so I added on to the building and put in 4 more stalls that you had to move all 4 cows at once, which is kind of a disadvantage, but I could milk 7 cows at one time. That worked real well. And then in 1979, my son came back. He was in Vietnam for 2 years and worked for implement dealer. He worked for a boat dealer, motorcycle dealer, and one man that I had working for me at the time, he left and went back to New York to take over his father's farm, which didn't work out eventually. And So Steve said he decided he would try and see if he was living on the farm in a trailer with 2 children, and he would leave in the morning before they got up. They weren't in school yet, and he'd come back. Usually they would be in bed. So, and his wife was a barber, was a city gal. He didn't know whether she would be happy out there on the farm near some cows. So they had living in a trailer down the road, quarter of a mile. And so I says, you'll have to work for me for about 2 years to get acclimated and learn the business if you're going to run this business. But a year and a half, why the laws changed, and I would have to charge 7% interest on the money for that for selling him property, and by doing it by June the 1st, I could get by with the 6%, which we did. It cost me more money, but it helped him. It
So
all
that's
worked
when
out.
you changed, he took
So,
over then.
In 10 years, a buy-lease arrangement, 10 years, he would bought all the cows and all the equipment. And that worked out well. In 10 years, he had it all paid off.
He turned out he liked to be,
And,
he liked farming as
yes.
well.
He thought that would, and she didn't complain too much. And so anyway, that went on, and then at that point, I didn't have to. Well, I've still done some milking at the point, and the herd kept growing some more. I forget just which year. We needed a bigger parlor, so it cut down the milking time. So he didn't own the land or anything, so he built this big milking parlor where you'd milk 20 cows at one time, which is a real labor-saving device. And of course, in the old parlor, you didn't see the milk either. It come from the cow, went in the tank, and it's cool. Same way on the new system, except that everything was bigger and larger, and the automatic milkers he had in the parlor there. When the cow, you clean the cow and you attach the thing. When it was done, shut the vacuum off, and the thing would fall off, and it would pull it out from underneath the udder, and you could let her go. But they had to move 10 cows at one time, 10 on each side, and which was a little bit different. But say everything worked out, and the herd kept growing, and he built a loafing barn. Later on, he had to build another one, and now he's got the state inspectors came in a year ago and says you can't have this brown water running out here in the ditch. That's illegal. We can fine you for that. So give them a definite time. That's got to be shut off. You can't keep animals in this old barn where I started milking. So he made preparations for that. So a year ago he built this new big 120 by 200 foot barn. Probably holds at least about 200 cows, or more than some heifers. And then the other lagoon that he built 25 years before, very little manure going in it. Well, was dirt. Can't have that. That's illegal. We can fine you. We're going to give you a certain time. You got to cut that off. So he had that tremendous decision to make. Do I quit? He had about 8-10 people working for him, and he was 65 at the time. So he decided, I guess, he would build a barn and leave room for expansion and make the help more economical to run the farm, so that he didn't have to be out there. One thing he didn't want to do was milk himself. And so he, one of the men that was better qualified, took over as a herd manager. So at that point,
It's really grown then.
he didn't have to even go out to the barn. He could be gone for a week or two and things would still go on okay, and herd and cattle were taken care of. Great relief for him, yes.
So it was so much different than when you started out.
Oh, yeah, that was tremendous
When you
difference.
talk about this automated system and everything, well, tell us about when you started milking cows.
Well, I started milking cows when I was 10 years old in the stanchion barn.
With a
at
stool?
At the old farm area, and milked up until, no, we didn't even have electricity at that time, see? Everything, sometime we had to pump the water by hand when the wind didn't blow.
From your windmill, yes.
Yeah, we had the windmill. That
But
was
you milked by hand at that
by
point.
hand, yes, for 2-3 years. And then milk machines came into being that were available. But I had 2 brothers. We always had a hired man that time. This would have been back about in the early 30s. So, well, Dad said, we got all this help. We don't need to spend money for a milk machine. Well, eventually, the hired man left, and maybe one of the brothers left and wouldn't anymore. So decided, well, we better have a milk machine sometime in the 30s there.
Okay.
And it was at that point.
They were fairly new then,
At
right?
that point, we were up to pretty near 40 cows.
Right.
And
Twice
so
a day you milked, right?
Yeah, that worked out real well, and things kept growing and progressing, and until the barn burned, and that was, as I said before, a catastrophe. So we still had in the old barn, we put in a milking system in the old barn where I was milking. I put in an automatic milking system. They weren't automatic, but you attached them, released them.
As modern as they were then.
Yes, it was typical for putting your every farm up and down the road at that point.
Did you move, was there a farmhouse on that farm that you moved to then?
Yes, there was. We had used it for early years to store some grain in, and we had a hired man in there later, and then for some time too, it needed some work in there, and the Dad decided that he was going to move up there, and I was going to stay at the old farm where the cows were until the barn burned, and that changed the whole scenario. And so.
But you had your parents had a house, and you and Doris had a house.
Yes, yeah, we had our own home then at that point. I done tremendous a lot of carpentry work in it and changed it and rebuild a kitchen in one part, and so that part worked out okay.
So you were a carpenter as well as a farmer then?
Well, in my short course in college there, I learned electrical work, I learned welding work, I learned equipment and a lot of different things that you normally do. And so that worked out real well. Most of I built in between, I built first a 28 by 36 tool shed as I got some tools, put them in, and pretty soon things grew and got bigger, and then I built another building, a 40 by 80, and the lumber all came off the farm from trees that I cut. And those period, we could have a mobile sawmill come to the farm and cut out your logs. That I'd cut and I'd pile them up. And, I knew what kind of size of lumbers that I needed from my buildings. I made as my brother, when he was in Michigan State, learned making these laminated rafters that they build on the second barn, where you nail 4 boards together into a curve. You have to make a form, put them in, and then nail them from both sides, and that's the way I built the 2 buildings.
Okay.
These wide open space inside, there's no roof support, it's self-supporting.
Yeah.
And they've been worked real good, they're still operational.
Sounds like Michigan State was a different school back then.
Oh, it was, yeah. I lived in a short course barracks along the Red Cedar River. There was nothing south of the Red Cedar River except the dairy farm out there.
Because it was a
Nearby,
farming
yeah.
school, right?
And a few other animals. And of course, later on, they moved way out to the south end, and now you know what's been out there. It's grown about 10 times what it was when I was there. So, yeah, so
Well, it sounded like you learned a lot, and they taught you a lot, and you must have known naturally what to do too.
They did have a 2-year, but I guess I decided I learned enough the first year, and I felt that Dad needed me there to milk the cows and help out with the farm work. So,
Well, it sounds like you learned enough to do what you needed to do.
yes, so and you just also through the years I learned the well down there. Another thing that struck me later on in years was more of my work at the shop down there. I learned forge work, where you heat iron and bend it and shape it and so forth. Well, welders were just coming into being at that time, and I did learn enough welding. When I got home, I bought a welder, and then had a lot of things. I had the equipment. I had to
You could repair it
remodify.
yourself.
And in changing the farm operations, when we first filled silo, we had a grain binder that cut the grain, the bundles, put a string around them, and drop them on the ground. About every 20 feet there'd be a bundle, which you had to go and later on pick them up, lay them on the wagon, lay them in the silo blower that chopped the corn at the same time and blew it in the silo, one operation. It was all physical, heavy work. And I went out west of Grand Rapids. One man had a field chopper. I said, man, that looks good to me. That's a real saver. So the next year we bought one. And so we had to get a different blower. And I had to build wagons for self-unloading wagons, which I used the welder and the lumber they had cut for them, and made 2 different styles, and they worked good. And then I had to build a machine that would wind up the apron on one wagon. The other wagon I used a belt, a heavy belt, and it had a pipe on the back. It would roll and bring the whole load to the back and drop it off into this elevator auger that blew it in the silo, because the sides was already cut. Didn't have to cut it, they would just blow it in. That was a tremendous labor saver to do that.
You sound like you were a good time manager as
So,
well.
You learn to change and do the things that you have to do as you progress along the line. And so anyway, started out with a 1-row chopper with a 50-horse tractor pulling it, but the chopper had an engine on it because the engine wasn't big enough to run the chopper. They didn't have PTO choppers then.
No.
They were run with engines on the machine, and that was a transition. So anyway, later on, the tractors got bigger, where every one with a PTO, and you didn't need the engine on the chopper.
Oh, you ran it off the tractor.
Yeah, off the power takeoff.
What's power takeoff? PTO, huh?
Yeah, thank you. And things progressed that way, and I built another silo, and ended up with, I guess we had 3 silos eventually. Well, some my son built, and
Now, were they wood or metal?
pardon?
Wood silos or
No,
metal?
they were cement stave silos, and they worked good. And then we put silo loaders into them, so avoid having to pitch the stuff out. and with the auger, and then the second silo, we had a conveyor that would bring the silage to the conveyor that was moving it out where the cows could eat it. And so that worked out real well. I say things kept growing all the while, and when Steve came back and he took over the system, more cows, different way of handling things, and so it went on to the present where he has over 300 dairy cows now and about 700 animals total with calves all the way through in all the barns. So it's been a continuous transition from the old style to the new style.
You have retired though, did you?
Well, I kind of had to retire last fall. I got arterial fibrillation, and what they do, they kill you first, and then they shock your heart back into normalcy. At the same time, they put me on a pill that was supposed to keep me from having a stroke. Well, you know, every pill got a downside for somebody. For me, it shrunk the capillaries in my lungs, so I got out of breath real quick. I walk up the stairs, I was out of breath, and so that put me on oxygen. I was on oxygen last winter for over 3 months, and not having read the instructions on this thing, it said it took, we find later, it takes 6 months before this chemical is out of your body when you quit taking this pill. And that's the way it was. So this last spring, I got off the summer, I guess it was, off the oxygen, and so I was back to feeling pretty normal as I was before again. I could do a day's work.
Well, today is November 7th of 2013.
1913,
So you are
yes.
94 years old then, right?
Yeah, last summer I was 94 years old.
Okay, and you just retired then, just
And
last
so
year.
My son got these huge big tractors, and some of them, of course, I had them before, and he says, well, maybe he put in GPS, maybe this is a little too complicated for you. And he had capable young people there to run them. So I haven't been on a big tractor now since last summer, I guess it was.
So you do as much as you want with the farm, and
So
you
I
don't
help
have-
at the farm when I can, what I do, and I still go out with the small tractors and with the rotary and the I don't haul manure anymore. I've done that for a lifetime.
You don't have to
From
do
the time
that.
I could use a pitchfork until then a year ago last fall, I guess it was, when I quit. So I'm taking it more easy now. I got more free time. Actually, I got too much free time. I do cut my own wood and burn it in the basement. So, but last spring, my health was such that I didn't think that I couldn't do anything there in April when I normally cut wood. So I didn't get any cut. Consequently, because I didn't feel I'd be able to go up and down the stairs to put it in the furnace. So now I'm looking for wood.
Looking for
and cutting some wood and buying some wood, so to get by this winter. So that's
so
the way life goes, you know. You take the bumps with
yeah. So you
the,
get better and worse and better and worse. Yeah.
and
Do you and Doris do any traveling or?
Well, through the years, I getting back to travel when he took over my business, so I didn't have to be there to milk. We done a lot of traveling. We made the first trip to Europe through another travel agency with a group, and I got to meet a few cousins there.
In Switzerland?
in Switzerland. I
Okay.
forgot to say earlier that my parents both
We're
came
both-
from Switzerland.
They were born there,
So
huh?
I'm born there, so I'm 100% Swiss.
100%.
And we, mother always kept writing. We had the names of relatives over there, and there was so we made it a point and told them what the hotel we was going to be in. So they met us there in the evening, and I don't remember. I don't think we went back to their home that night because the group were moving on the next day.
You were with a tour, huh?
But a little later, we had another tour into Europe, and so we met some of the family and stayed overnight with them. One of the cousins,
These would be cousins.
and later on, we made a third trip through somewhere. And anyway, we were there from another trip. We
Mhm.
left. I think we left Germany. I think. We left Germany, we visited another lady and rented a car and drove to Switzerland and then spent some time with this cousin. And then the last time we went there, we took a trip to Italy or Switzerland. No, it was. Or was it Italy?
Spain.
Spain.
Spain, yeah, a trip around Spain.
You knew they were speaking a different language, yes.
And we made 9 days for this tour of 2 buses, about 40 people in each bus. And they went clear around the country, probably a week or 10 days. And ended in Madrid, so at that point we flew back to Zurich, Switzerland, and spent 11 days with my another cousin that we knew, and traveled around the state. So that worked has been our 4th trip over there, and in between got to meet many other cousins, the 2nd and 3rd cousins, because the first cousins were pretty well all gone. See,
Right.
and I got to be in the home where my mother grew up, with the cousins there, and I said, "Who's this old couple up here on the wall? A big picture." They said, "That's your grandpa and grandma." Up
Wow.
there. Yeah.
Were they farmers as well?
Yeah, they were farmers, and they were the house and the barn. Those days were built
Connected.
somewhat together.
Mhm.
Yes, and then they had later on, when we come 2nd or 3rd trip, they built another barn just for the cattle. So that works out better. So they had more room in the house. So watching the milk and what they were getting for milk compared to what we were getting, I thought they were making a fortune because the government was supporting them considerable. And that kind of later years I discovered that they cut down this subsidy that they were paying farmers, so many of them started raising some beef animals, or they had some hogs they were raising, or chickens as a supplemental income. So things have changed over there too.
Over there as well.
Through the years, and I'd like to see everybody spend a couple of weeks just traveling and seeing Switzerland as it is. Presently, it's an expensive place to live. Fuel right now, gas is $8 a gallon,
Wow.
and a meal at a restaurant, most anywhere, even if you're not drinking, is $50 a person.
Aye.
And but
Wow.
A nice place to visit, but you wouldn't want to live there.
it is. But we've been there in the summer months, and we've been there in the winter months, both. And Switzerland is of a type of topography. You can ski 12 months of the year. You can go up in these
Up in the
we've been
mountains.
there in the summertime, elevation's high enough, that the tracks are so steep that you don't get traction from the steel wheels on the rails. They use a cog rail with a rail in the middle with cogs on it, and this wheel runs it and takes it up. The elevation that's so steep, up to the top up there where you can see for miles, and you can see in the distance people skiing. It's quite a
And it's
difference
Beautiful, yeah.
than when then you get down in the valley where things are going. Yeah, so they do the elevation.
So was all your traveling overseas, or did you travel around the United States as well?
Well, we've traveled by car, every state in the union, and we've traveled through Australia. Been there for, I don't know, a week or two, and then New Zealand. There's a 1,000-mile flight between New Zealand and Australia, and lived on the South Island and done some exploring there. This was as a group, and then the tour headed to the North Island. So we got back on an old DC-3. It was the old thing that they used to fly out of Grand Rapids. First airplane I flew in 1941, and flew. And then from there we kind of lost track.
Well, you were in Australia, and
Oh, yeah, we spent. It was somewhat a farm tour. We did stay. In fact, we stayed with farm families over there. One was a beef farmer, and overnight, and then we flew. We traveled somewhere around the state too, in Australia. We didn't go out in the outback or anywhere in the three different cities. And then from there we flew to New Zealand and on the South Island and toured that. And then flew to the North Island and spent some time there with those people. They were Maoris, they call them. And they put out quite a show for us there one evening.
they have a regular tourist
And,
thing they do.
I
Huh?
don't remember how long we were there, probably a week. And then from there, we decided we'd fly to Hawaii, because we'd been there once before on a tour, and it's a 17-hour flight from LA down to Sydney. And this would shorten up, and we was sent to visit some more in Hawaii, some of the other islands that we hadn't been on before.
That would break up the trip,
And
right?
that worked out real well. In fact, we had some friends that lived on a different island. I forget which one was. We spent some time with those, and we rented a car, and drove clear around that big island, and then flew back to the Oahu, where the main airport was. You'd be flying from one island to the other, but we had to go back, I guess, to fly back to LA from the Oahu, and spent some time there too, and with those people, and went back home, went back to work for a while, and then thought about now where can we go next.
Sounds like you enjoyed yourself a lot, both of you. Yeah.
And of course, in that same period, my daughter lived in California, so we did fly out there a few times, rent a car, and spent some time with them. Another time we took a trip flew to Denver, Colorado, rented a car and drove north through Colorado and up in Nevada, or
national parks?
Montana, I guess it was,
Yeah.
and visit that area. And other times we would fly to Washington out there, rent a car, and spend some time touring those areas. And it happened that she had a problem, couldn't hardly breathe, so they took her to the hospital one night.
Yeah.
And she had to stint put in
In Washington.
Washington out there in the hospital. And they said, well, you can't fly right away. So we rent a car and drove down into Utah and into the mountains and saw an area where previous to that, remember they had, I don't know what it was, an earthquake or something, or a storm that flattened all these trees, great
Oh.
big trees.
Mount St.
Everything
Helens.
was flattened right down. And for some years previous to that, of course, they took out the good logs that was available, and they replanted some new trees, pine trees. We could see them a foot tall or something like that in between. And so
So you saw places you wouldn't have seen if she hadn't had trouble.
uh,
You saw places you wouldn't have gone to.
Yeah, that's right. So and there was another place down there that I guess we stayed overnight down there too, several places. And then time was up that we could fly back, so we flew back, drove back to Washington and flew back home again. And so it was kind of an extended trip, but everything worked out. And I don't know where we would fly to Boston maybe and rent a car and tour those areas. And another time we went up into was it the Aleutians? Took a boat out of Boston and went northwest somewhere,
Up into
all night tour on a boat. There's islands up there. I can't think
off
of the
from
names.
Maine, up in
Northern
Prince
Maine.
Edward Islands, okay.
Out of Maine, no, it was, I don't know if that was Canadian territory.
could be Nova Scotia or something, or
Nova Scotia.
I can't
Prince
remember
Edward Island.
can't remember the name of the islands anyway. So anyway, you take a boat from one to the other, travel. And then I had a sister that lived down in Virginia, so we'd drive down there and spend some time down there and visit them. In the wintertime, we'd take a week and drive to Florida. And my brother lived down there, and her brother lived down there, and we'd spend some time down there, traveling the state and different areas. So he kept on the move, seemed like. There was no cows to milk down there.
You made up for lost time, didn't you?
And so we'd be back home, and there was always something to do back home. And it was in 1946 when we got married. I joined the Michigan Farm Bureau. Of course, I couldn't milk cows twice a day. I couldn't attend meetings. They were usually in a meeting, so I didn't get involved too much till a few later years when I got some help. And so I've been a member for 67 years, and when I didn't have to milk anymore in the last 32 years, we would travel to the national meetings, which were held throughout all of southern United States. The most northern one was in Kansas City. The rest of them were all further south through California, Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, the Carolinas, you name it. So I have attended 25 national
Oh my.
Farm Bureau meetings, and I've been a member of the Michigan Farm Bureau for the same length of time. And I've been a delegate to the Michigan Farm Bureau. Originally used to go to Lansing. They had them, and then they went up to Traverse City for some years, and the last 3 years they were in Grand Rapids. So I've been a delegate for our district there. In fact, we are signed up for January 7th to be down there for 3 days.
Wonderful.
December.
And I attended a number of meetings in Lansing involving things to do with the farming, and legislative meetings, go to meet with a number of legislators. So it's been a real experience to do this and get to meet a lot of other farmers from throughout the state. But I've noticed through the years that people that used to come to the meetings, they're no longer there. They were in their 70s and 80s, and they either got too old or they died off, and others are taking their place. They're usually about, for Michigan, we have around 400 delegates.
That's wonderful.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ionia County is allotted, I think, nine or 10 delegates. But sometimes we have enough, sometimes we don't. Last year we ended up, she and I were the last ones, the last day. The rest had all had to go back and go to work.
Your farm is right near on the Ionia County line, kind of, isn't
Well,
it?
almost, we're 2 miles from Ionia County line, yes. So that, so we do business in Saranac and Ionia and Lowell both.
All of them, huh?
Pretty much, sometimes Belding, so all within about 7 miles from Lowell, 10 miles from Belding, or 10 miles from Ionia.
So you can take your pick.
In fact, we were in Ionia this morning, and every Thursday morning, the Ionia Chamber of Commerce puts on a travelogue on various parts of the things that the different parts of the world, and they've been real interesting. A lot of places that we've been, but you never cover the material. This today it was on France and Paris. What a gracious place. And to see buildings and stuff that were built back in the 1600s, the 1700s, and things like this, and how the government and gave a tremendous history going way back into the 1400s, you know, and these things that happened, these countries changed.
And they
the
have these
wars.
travelogues every week.
Yes, these wars have taken place and gained and kill off one, and you know, if you read, I was really attracted much to, in fact, European history was very boring in school. Think, man, I'll never see that place. So, but what a revelation it was when we traveled, and people on the bus as we travel across the country would reveal so much of this information of history. Man, that's I missed something. I should have studied more about it. So I did learn so much on history of these countries, traveling through them with the people that live there and talk to you.
It was much more interesting than just reading it out of a book.
Oh yes, much more interesting. Some of the bus tours are in Switzerland. I was the last one on the bus. I was visiting with the farmers because I could talk the Swiss language.
Oh, okay. You
So,
learned that as a child because your parents
yes, yeah, I could carry out a conversation in the Swiss language. We always used it at home. My parents knew no English. My oldest brother, when he went to country school, he had to learn some English. Everything was spoken in the Swiss language on the farm there.
So you learned English at school then?
Yes,
literally.
pretty much. Well, mostly from my brothers because they were
first.
in school ahead of me, see? And so...
so they gave you a heads up on
yes,
on the language.
I don't remember having too much trouble with English in school, so that it's been an interesting life. I hope I saved enough to last me as long as I do, and which a lot of people haven't forecast that they seem to run out of money before they're still here, you know, because the cost of living has escalated so rapidly and so fast in the last few years. You know, we used to buy a pair of shoes for $2. Back years ago, we always had, Dad had more than just milk cows. He had hogs, and he had chickens, and he had sheep. He says if one enterprise don't make much money, maybe the other one will. Consequently, we had the meat to eat. Mother canned the meat and the hams from the hogs that he butchered. He smoked those. They hung in the attic. We had fresh ham any time of the year. and otherwise she canned, and we always had our own eggs. We had our chickens. He'd go out the field of a chicken. He said, "This chicken is laying. We're going to eat him." So farmers ate real well during the Depression because we raised 98% of our own
Sure.
food. We
Sure.
had our milk. We made our own butter, and he had the cheese making ability that he learned in Switzerland that he done in Wisconsin before he come back to Lowell. He met Mother on the boat, 3-week trip from France
Mhm.
to New York, and so she had those days you had to have somebody here that would sponsor you, so you wouldn't be a burden on other people. She knew somebody. Can't think of the name, Lowell, and she had a job doing housekeeping, housework.
So she
And,
came here as a single
Some way
woman.
he learned from somebody in Wisconsin, being a Swiss cheese making state, got a job over there. And I should have recorded a lot of this information, but it never interests me about time-wise, whether he was there a year or two, I don't know. Anyway, apparently he kept track of her back Lowell, so he come back and got a job on a farm north
So
of
that-
Lowell.
So that he could be with her, right?
And they had one boy, maybe two, and they were living upstairs in this house. Everything, the water, everything they had to carry up there and carry it down. And it wasn't too well for her, I guess, and maybe the farm didn't pay too well, and he got this other job over the Allendale to another farmer. He kept saving every dollar that he could because he knew he wanted to buy a farm, which he did in 1920, the one that we moved to.
Now, did he ever make any cheese around here?
Make what?
Cheese?
Oh yes, yeah. As soon as he had his own cows, why he was making cheese, but he had that ability and equipment for it. So I grew up with Swiss cheese, and
What, did he sell it to anyone, or was it just for the
no,
family?
he didn't sell it.
It was just for the
As I
family.
recall, he probably gave some at Christmas time.
Yeah.
To some of the neighbors or somebody. He had a brother that came over, only one brother, and they had 3 children. And so we did people that we knew, and so in fact Betty Yeiter, she's a first cousin.
So are all the Roths in this area related to you?
No, they're not. The Roth Gerst, they're not related. Ralph and Alan, they're both dead. They were in my class. Ralph was.
Mhm.
They're gone. And there was my brother, oldest brother, and Fred, they're gone. And my next youngest brother, he's gone. My sister's gone. I got my one youngest brother, lives over in Okemos. He's still alive.
But he's the only Roth.
Only brother left,
Yeah.
close relative that I have.
Okay.
Yeah, otherwise, well, Ernestine, the other cousin, she's dead. And Maynard, the other cousin, he just died here a few months back.
So he was a cousin of yours
Yeah,
as
he was a
well.
cousin. So Betty is the only one that's a first cousin that's left here. She must be 80-something. But she's doing real well. She's taking care of herself.
She is.
She exercises, and I guess kind of special on her food. If there's a meal somewhere at church, she don't show up.
No?
She has her special things that she wants to eat, I guess, for some reason. Yeah.
She'd be another person that would have a good story for us too.
Yeah, she would. And Ernestine and I used to call each other. We started out talking the Swiss language, and pretty soon we get to a word we couldn't think. Well, then we go back to English. Mhm. And having been over there and visit and talk with the people, I kept up on the language. There's
That's
still
great.
some words that you don't normally use. You don't think of. Young kids over there for some time now, they get English in their school. And I found they're a little reluctant even when we were there, people in their 30s, 40s, reluctant to use it.
They're afraid
They'd
that-
rather speak their own native language,
Yeah.
yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, they're about like I am, calling Swiss, and they're talking English. But I have no problem getting along with them. The older people, very few of them know much English at all.
Right, they never, yeah.
In early years, yeah.
So you met some cousins that you had never met before?
Oh yes, we met a number of cousins over there, and we stayed with several of them. One was, oh gosh, probably a week where we were there. Sometimes with a different one. One when we flew in to Zurich, apartment was being reorganized, rebuilt, or something. It wasn't finished, so we stayed in the hotel near there, and we traveled. They went with us to another neighbor that we knew, another cousin.
Had they ever come over to visit you?
Yeah, we've had, I think, about 10 people come over here and spend some time with us. And of course, they get the history of this country and all the nice places to see, and so they do like to travel. And two of them took trips to Niagara Falls,
Oh,
and it was kind of a fascination. I guess they weren't too crazy about going to see our mountains because they
got
got
plenty of
something
those.
that's far exceeds what we got here.
Oh,
And but they did try to take a week sometimes, I guess, or better to make the rounds, go through Canada, up through the Upper Peninsula, across Canada, then come back through Ohio in that area and see more of the country.
We didn't get it very warm in here for you, Ed.
And things, so been really enjoyable having them. I wish more of them. We had a young lady, she was single with a family. We met at her home earlier and saw her parents and her grandparents. And she knew somebody in Wisconsin, so she flew over and spent some time in Wisconsin. Probably was a relative. And then being in contact with us, well, why don't you, close enough, why don't you come to Michigan? So she was with us for a week and done some traveling around. This happened to be in the winter time. We went over to Frankenmuth to their excursions they had over there with her one day. And don't know how much further we did get around, but it was kind
You
of...
gave her a good tour, huh?
It was kind of a strange, we come to a cross and we traveled a railroad, I think, crossed the railroad. She said, stop, let me take a picture of this long, far as you can see, railroad here. You know, here in Switzerland, you don't go very far in one straight direction.
It's all,
You're going up or down or going
Oh,
around. Yeah, until they built their Autobahn, which is a kind of a two-lane, double-lane highway separated like we have here. And some of those I noticed they built down over a river. It was cheaper, I guess, to move all these homes to build the road some areas. And so and of course their trains are all electric over there because they got the water power, and their water power is all generated by water power. See, so it's much cheaper, and so
cheaper than fuel, yeah.
and many people have might even heat their homes some with electric, and I think some of them are using gas that they're buying. Some are using wood. Over there, if you cut a tree, the law is you got to plant another one. That way they maintain their forests for lumber. And we did visit some of the lumber yards, traveling around. We've been in every canton in Switzerland at one point or another. and went through a covered bridge. It happened to be a two-way street bridge. You don't have any of them in
No,
over here. I said, stop, I gotta take a look, I gotta take a picture of this.
That's
There
a big
was
bridge.
Sawmill, they weren't working, I gotta get a picture of this. So, it was real interesting traffic over there. And I did rent a car twice when we were there, and traveled around, some on our own, from one place to the other. It worked out okay, so.
She wants me to come
Yes.
over and join you.
I want your wife to join you in this
Uh,
video.
You wanna say anything yet? This,
You've been doing a good job.
This is Ed's wife, Doris, and you've been married how many years?
67 years. So, we don't know how many more we're gonna get, but we'll take all there's there.
I think you've made the best of them.
I'm living on a good lifestyle through the years, taking care of myself, which has contributed to my extra 10 years that I might not got otherwise. If you read the obituaries, there isn't too many to get up in the 90s.
No,
No,
you've lived a good life,
I have,
and I bet your wife has taken good care of you too.
and she's a good cook, and so we've learned to eat like Dr. Oz says. If you want to progress to longevity, the three most important things you can do is to eat right nutritionally, exercise, keep moving, and don't worry. So those three factors will determine pretty much how you live outside of an accident or something like this.
I think that's a great.
The Lowell Area Historical Museum is proud to sponsor community oral history interviews. The Lowell Area Historical Museum educates, enriches, and inspires our community and visitors through the preservation and presentation of Lowell area history. For reservations and more information, contact the Lowell Area Historical Museum at 616-897-7688.